12. Avon was summoned into an inquiry room. He was faced by a senior official wearing the gold and dark blue braid of the administration's financial division. Avon took a seat. The questioning was run-of-the-mill, concerning the financial status of the planet Scat and the inevitable questions of residual rights to minerals, airspace, and the fact that the Federation retained the right to use up to 40% of the planet's surface for military purposes if the need arose. The Federation, it seemed, would choose which 40%. Avon made up information about the other life forms on the planet, assured the unnamed official that it was all non-sentient, told him that there were no other planets in the area that were the slightest bit habitable, and that this was why, as their record books showed, the planet had been colonized some 500 years before, only to find itself unable to persuade others to come out and visit. They had not even known of the Federation until a short while ago, so lacking were they in basic technological equipment. Only when a broken-down Federation ship happened on them was the secret of interstellar flight rediscovered. And now the decision had been taken to rejoin the fold of mankind and end the isolation that had lasted on the planet for 500 years. Avon enjoyed his speech. It was so very different from anything he would normally do, and he found himself rather good at it. He resisted the temptation to elaborate too much. It had to sound as if he had explained the story too many times before. The official was bored. He pressed contacts and gave Avon his chance to enter the dome for the specific purpose of discussing trade relations and funding. "You will need to contact Finance 7, the official concluded. Avon feigned surprise. The guard yawned, took a final look at the screen in front of him, but hidden from Avon's gaze, and then got up and left without a word. Avon moved to follow, but was beaten to the door by the entry of a more senior, or at least less bored, officer. He pushed Avon back into his chair with ill-conceived disdain. "You are Morstan Bjarno?" asked the new official. "I am." "Are you sure you have never been known by any other name?" "Quite sure." "Like perhaps Care Avon?" Avon pressed hard on the contact of the bracelet on his left wrist. On board the docked Revenge, the battle station's command echoed through the empty ship. Villa awoke slowly. Part of him felt as if it were suffering from the greatest hangover of all time. Another part felt refreshed and happy. The problem was he wasn't sure which part was which. The thief rubbed the back of his neck, in case someone had hit him, but he found no bump. He looked up at the screens, and the sight that met his eyes brought him back to life. Most of the sky around the planet was now covered by spaceships of varying shapes, sizes, and allegiances. The tendency spotted by Terminal Computer before it had shut down had come to fruition. The first major battle of the Civil War was being fought in the skies above Villa's head. Without thinking, Villa punched controls on Terminal Computer to bring some of the scenes into sharper focus, but nothing happened. He repeated the commands, but to no avail. "Villa," it was Cat. "Sir, if I may be so bold, you should listen to me sometimes. Terminal Computer has been taken over by the sonic beams of Gamma. Sir, it is totally dysfunctional. Fortunately, the Gamorans are exercising their forces over such a wide area that the signal is weaker than before. I was able to remove some of the controls prior to the power becoming too great." "So, what brought me round?" "The planet is now isolated from Tariel cell interference, since all commands have to be passed through me." "You mean you are running this planet?" "Alas, no, sir. That is beyond my capacities, although I am working on it. However, I do control life support, security, and that sort of thing." "And can you also tell me what the Gamorans are doing turning up in the middle of a battle between Servalan, the Federation's military command, and the administration?" "Again, sir, alas, no." "Thank you for that simple answer." "But I can tell you that the Gamorans appear to have neutralized the ships of the opposing forces. They are working their way through the fleets now without resistance. Marvellous. The galaxy's about to be overrun by people from the planet we just tricked out of a teleport device. I'm sitting here unable to move, and Avon is down on Earth fiddling with the currency computer of an administration that is about to cease to exist. I need a drink. No, said Kat, to Villa's total surprise. What do you mean, no? Since when did you become teetotal? Sir, I have always been able to restrain myself when the task in hand was more important than a drink or injection of other intoxicating substances. Look at the screens, sir. Avon stepped forward into the cell. If he realized the irony of his situation, he didn't show it. The last cell he had been held captive in had been on Gouda Prime, and his warder had been Corell. Avon checked the room carefully. The walls were whitewashed and otherwise bare. The door appeared to be a standard military treble-reinforced affair, with a handprint lock which Villa would undoubtedly have been able to bypass, but was not something Avon could solve. In the top right-hand corner was an observation camera. Below it was the single piece of furniture, a hard bed. Avon sat down and waited. Moments later, 4 guards came to the cell, removed him with all the violence they could muster, and pushed him down the brightly lit corridor past more cell doors into a reception room. By the time he arrived, much of Avon's anatomy was bruised, bleeding, or both. Sitting at an impressive desk facing the doorway was a senior official of the administration, wearing the arm decorations of an official interrogator. The woman looked across the desk at Avon, flanked by the guards. He was not invited to sit. A cruel smile played across her face. This, she knew, was going to be her day. You are Care Avon, one of the 10 most wanted men in the Federation. She announced the fact with ill-concealed pride. She promised herself she was going to dine out on every moment of this interview for the rest of her life. Avon had taken his decision in the cell. Denying the charge could only buy a small amount of time and a lot of pain, and that time would only be valuable if Corell was on her way, which he rather doubted. You have me at a disadvantage, he said with a smile, which hurt his lips. That is how it is supposed to be, replied the interrogator, returning the smile. Beneath the hardness and ingrained violence, the woman could once have been attractive. Now the lines on her face showed only the enjoyment of inflicting pain. Probably a psychopath, thought Avon. He logged the thought. Even psychopaths have weaknesses. You have come back to Earth, Care Avon. What was your plan? And don't tell me it was to negotiate credits with Finance 7. Is it Blake? Where is he? Incorrect assumptions, interrogator, replied Avon quickly. The planet Scat exists, and I am its official negotiator. Don't play with me, Avon. You may have tricked lesser mortals during your years on the run, but this time you've tried your luck too far. This is Earth, and this is the heart of the administration, and I hold the rank of senior consultant interrogator. You'll get away with nothing here. Despite her speech, the interrogator was still enjoying herself. It was as if she wanted the interview to take a long time so that she could break him down. With care, she could bring in not just Avon, but also Blake, Villa, Callie, Sulin, the whole lot of them. I find it hard to believe, she continued, that the almighty Avon, arch-criminal with Blake, has now settled down to be financial advisor to a planet humbly taking its place within a federation which he and Blake aimed to destroy. That, interrogator, is a simplification of the truth which even the administration ought not to make. I have used the planet as a base because I needed a base on which to work. However, not for the first time I have decided to come to your aid. And how exactly are you coming to my aid? The interrogator had half a feeling that this was not the line that the questioning ought to be taking. A major revolt is about to be started by Servalan. The interrogator's laugh made Avon pause. It was raucous, far louder than seemed possible from such a slight frame. "You are too late, Avon. You're losing your touch. Servalan has launched her attack." "Then you have few moments left," Avon told her. "As soon as Servalan moves in, the Gamorreans will counterattack, and they have a weapon which will disable everything you have." "You are making it up, Avon. Your crimes are clear. But this time, you will not be sent to a penal colony. You will be put on display as a lesson to all the other malcontents. We'll leave your brain functioning, but suspend the rest of your miserable body in eternal animation. You'll be a total cripple, Avon, moved from planet to planet to show off to all the other little men who grow too big and think they can take on the administration. Now, enough nonsense. Where is Blake?" "Blake is dead," said Avon, his temper rising. "And before you get any further carried away with your own insanity, check the latest battle reports from the fleet, because I am the only person who knows how to counter the force of the Gamorreans, and with me dead or out of action, there is nothing to stop their total overthrow of the administration and its precious federation." The interrogator sneered. "I've never heard of the Gamorreans. Avon, you do not seriously suggest—" Something in Avon's face made the interrogator stop, despite herself. She turned to a screen on her desk and pushed 3 contacts, giving code messages in response to buzzes coming from the screen. She recognized the implications of her information at once. "Let us assume," she stated casually, "that there is something in what you say. What do you offer the administration that will be of interest to it?" "Computer knowledge," said Avon simply. The interrogator laughed. "We have our own experts, Avon," she said. "Then call them in," said Avon, "and let them evaluate the situation and my knowledge." A light flashed on the interrogator's desk. She pressed a contact, and the door slid open. Corell walked in, smiling as ever. "Defences," said Villa to himself. "That's what we need. Armaments and defences and a force field. Terminal computer." As he spoke, he remembered the mainframe's problem. He turned to Kat. "Do we have defences on this planet?" he asked hopefully. "The planet is unarmed, but does have primitive shielding, anti-glare screens, quantra locking on all hatches." Villa stopped listening, groaned, and sank back into his chair. Kat tried further reassurance. "The doors are all sealed, and there is nothing on the surface to suggest that the planet is occupied by anything other than the latest mutations. It is also still severely cold on the planet's surface, which will make it impossible for anyone to travel more than the smallest distances. You should remain unharmed and safe, as long as you do not venture onto the surface." "Tell my heart that," said Villa. "It doesn't seem to accept computer logic." He looked back at the screens in dismay. Ships from all fleets seemed to be constantly drifting closer. As he watched, he saw one ship head too quickly towards the surface of Terminal, and the subsequent vibration from the crash could be felt even deep in the interior. There was silence, until a second ship came down. This one seemed to be more under control, almost as if it was still being piloted down despite the loss of computer guidance. Even in his state of panic, Villa could spare half a second of admiration for that sort of piloting. As the ship manoeuvred towards the gloom of the planet's surface, Villa could make out its markings. It was an administration ship, a ceremonial craft refurbished as a war cruiser by the look of things. The pilot appeared to have some sort of idea where he was heading as the ship glided gently through the thin atmosphere. But even the expert at the controls had difficulties at the last moment, and the ship crashed, with a sickening thud, to halt a few hundred yards away from the main airlocks and entrance to the tunnels. In the darkness, Villa could just about make out the main airlocks on the ship opening, and a single figure emerging. He had a slight limp. "Can't we put some light on him?" asked Villa. "Only if you wish to advertise your presence," replied Kat. The animals will get him. As the machine spoke, Villa saw a tall grey figure appear from behind the ship. The object must have only recently evolved, for Villa could not recall seeing anything quite like it before, even on this forsaken planet. Something strange had happened to the creature. The two front legs were used for walking in a slow, ponderous way, but the back legs appeared to reach over the body and act as grotesque arms ending in 6 long pointed fingers. The body itself was covered in a dark, thick fur, and in the gloom it was difficult to see where body ended and head began. But what there was no mistaking was the mouth. It was huge, half as large as the rest of the creature, and alternatively snapping with vast teeth and lashing out with a giant red tongue. On top, the ears merged with a vast pointed horn. The eyes, too, evolved for the planet's current dark climate, were huge, almost pulsating. Villa could feel the thuds as the creature made its way towards the hobbling stranger. For once, Villa had the start of what was almost an insight. What made him leave his ship? He asked to himself. Cat offered no opinion. I mean, it's freezing cold out there, and there are creatures. So why does he get out of his ship? Villa could have said, but he didn't because the thought was too worrying to acknowledge, that it was almost as if the man knew where he was going, and where he was going was towards the main entry lock, with the creature not far behind. Handicapped by a limp and the cold, the man's progress was painfully slow, but it did take him to within a few feet of the secondary hatch, which Avon had initially used to gain access to the underground passages of Terminal. On top of the hatch was one of the cameras that was used to keep an eye on the surface. As the man made it to within a few feet of the camera position, the creature made its first attack. Half shuffle, half hop, mouth open so wide it was possible to see the furrows on the bright red tongue and count the searing white teeth. The man turned at the last moment and pulled a weapon. The creature, shot in the mouth, reared backwards, its hind feet flapping in the air. As it fell, one leg came down towards the man, lacerating him badly, so that he fell onto the frozen ground under the impact. As he fell, Villa saw 2 things. One was a second creature emerging from the gloom, but that hardly seemed to register in his mind. What grabbed his attention and held him paralysed were the features of a man now desperately trying to pick himself up and resume his journey towards the entry bay. His hair was dark, slightly curly, his nose straight and firm, his eyes deep and piercing. It was a young face, hardened by experience, perhaps too much experience. Beneath the dirt and grime, the scratches and the blood, Villa could not fail to recognise it. At the same time, the man saw the camera and caught its movements. He crawled across the hard ground and grabbed it. "For pity's sake," he cried, "if there's anyone down there, open up!" Villa reached across and touched the control mechanism. Half a mile above him, and the service hatch opened. For the moment, that was all he could do. There was no microphone up to the surface to allow him to communicate with the barely moving form. Either he would see the entrance, have enough strength to climb into the hatchway and take his chance, or the second creature would get him. Villa could only watch. Slowly, painfully, the man half rose. He saw the opening and crawled towards it. With an enormous effort, he pulled himself upright on the lid of the hatch and began to climb over. He looked up at the second creature, saw it, and fired a shot. But his aim was poor, and he merely succeeded in wounding the creature. The man got his legs over into the shaft, but seemed unable to start lowering himself down the ladder. Bleakly, he kept peering at the frightened manifestation that was once more coming at him. Villa touched the controls. The lid of the shaft came down, forcing the man to lower his head, and trapping the pointed fingers of the creature's rear legs. Villa waited and listened for a moment. Either the man had hung on and was now slowly making the climb down the shaft, or else he had let go, and by now would be lying dead at the bottom of the pit. At least, thought Villa, it was probably a better way to die. Avon certainly does know about the Gamorreans, and he also knows that the only way to overcome their power is to bypass the Tariel cells. Carell spoke as if nothing had changed. Her voice and her manner were all as they had always been. The interrogator was unimpressed. Everything runs on Tariel cells. You cannot bypass everything. The prisoner is obviously lying. I must protest at my official territory as SCI scan base being overturned in this way. Carell ignored the protests. The Gamorans have little in the way of weaponry since they don't need it. They use their sound controls to disable, and then they walk in and take over. If one major weapon system could be converted to work without Tariel cells, it could blast them from the skies. The interrogator looked at Avon, at Carell's authority card, and scowled in disbelief. Very well, Avon. You'll convert one of the Central Defense Complex computers. Chief Commissioner Carell will show you how. She rose. Carell remained standing by the door where she had been throughout the interview. Then Avon will be returned to me for further interrogation. Well now, said Avon slowly, that does not seem much of a bargain to me. You are in no position to bargain, said the interrogator. Your first offer was living death. Your second offer was to defend your administration, and then death. I don't like either. What do you want? Asked Carell. Don't you know? Asked Avon. I had gained the distinct impression that you knew me inside out. I give you the pleasure of telling us. I want what I came for. Credit the discussions with Finance 7 and safe passage away from Earth. The interrogator stopped Carell replying. Chief Commissioner, I protest. It would be insane to accept terms from a criminal. If you don't think the administration is worth safe passage... Carell took a quick look in the interrogator's eyes and stepped forward. Under the special powers invested in me by the President of the Federation and sovereign power of the inner and outer worlds, I must overrule any feelings you have, senior consultant. She placed a second small card on the desk in front of the interrogator. It had the desired effect. With your permission, interrogator, she continued, emphasizing the words, allowing the older woman to regain as much of her dignity as she wanted, I shall take this man to begin work on the Central Defense Computer Complex. In return for the successful completion of the mission, he shall have all he asks. Carell turned, opened the door with a slight pressure of her right hand on the pad, and let Avon step in front of her. As they walked, Avon sensed rather than felt the gun pointed at his back. They proceeded down a drab grey corridor, past unmarked doors. For Avon, it was a helpful walk, adding to his knowledge of the local topography. At the third intersection, they turned into a narrower passage, and Carell told Avon to stop. She pressed her hand onto a control panel, spoke her name into a box, and the door obediently opened for her. Within the room, 5 men were gathered around a mainframe computing unit. Parts of the casing had been removed, and various components lay scattered on benches. Above, a large screen showed the location of the forces, the Federation in white, Servalan in red, the Gamorans in blue. Avon glanced casually at where he knew Terminal to be. There were ships all around the area, but the planet itself did not register. Carell showed her authorization card to the technicians. They stood to attention. This man is Avon. He has knowledge of the attacking forces and of computer systems, she announced. He will be in charge of the repairs to the defense systems. Born, she turned to one of the computer workers, inform Avon of the current situation. But before the man could speak, Avon stepped forward, his right hand slightly raised, his finger pointing. He spoke in a relaxed, calm manner. There is no need. I can see what you've been up to. The fact you are still working on the system shows that the Gamoran weapon has range problems. At this distance, it can affect equipment, but not people. He turned away from the men and looked at Carell. I shall need to have some equipment. Of course, I shall arrange it. I don't doubt it, Avon replied, his voice heavy with sarcasm. You seem to have influence in the highest of places. He looked at her eyes, trying to read them, but she looked back with a carefree, relaxed smile that was becoming irritating. Avon wrote out the list of computer items he needed, and Carell left with it. He then turned back to the analysing databanks through which he guessed much of Earth's defences were channelled. He gave instructions to the 5 men on parts of the system he wanted dismantled, and then turned to the master control board, amplifying the signal from Gamma and watching the results. "Villa!" Villa turned in a hurry. "Hello," he said quickly. "I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead before, and then I thought you were dead just now. Villa, you are babbling, which is good because it means you really are here. I would hate to think I'd start dreaming about you." No, I'm here, but what I can't make out is what you were doing here. I thought you were dead." "Don't start that again. Let's take this step by step. Are you here alone?" "For the moment, yes. Avon's on Earth." "Avon? I don't believe it. You are still with Avon? I thought after Gouda Prime you'd have parted company with him for good. Or failing that, shot him." Villa looked at Tarrant as his erstwhile friend and sometime enemy eased himself off the bed. Tarrant had joined Avon and Villa soon after the battle to save the galaxy from invasion by the Andromedans. From then on, with Blake seemingly lost forever, Avon and Tarrant had battled for the leadership of the survivors of Blake's original 7. Tarrant was a good pilot, possibly even better than Carell, but he lacked Avon's computer knowledge, and his impetuosity hammered his ability for self-preservation. He had been seriously injured on Gouda Prime as the ship had crashed, but had made it to the control room. Villa had thought him shot by the Federation guards. "Not quite shot," Tarrant told him. "I'd lost a lot of blood. It was as much as I could do to get into the base. Once there, I collapsed. The next thing I knew, I was still lying on the floor, but the place was deserted. I went outside, found an old freighter, and got her into the air on my own." "You must have been unconscious for 2 days," Villa told him. "I watched you take off." Tarrant was staggered. "Where were you?" he demanded. "In the next ship." "I went through agony on that freighter, and all because I had no one to dress the wounds or to keep watch while I rested. And all the time you were skulking in a ship next door. What made you come out? Rain damage?" "The food ran out." "So Avon came and rescued you." "No, he did not," said Villa. He began to get angry. "And if you've just come inside to tell me off for not popping into your space freighter when you wanted me—" "No, Villa," Tarrant told him. "I came inside to get away from a 10-foot-tall, red and grey creature out there on the surface that certainly wasn't around last time I was here." "So what brought you here?" "There's a full-scale war going on out there. Or hadn't you noticed?" "And whose side are you on?" "Perhaps I should ask you that. We had a 3-cornered fight going between Federation rebels, Servalan's troops, and Loyalist administration troops, when suddenly another fleet of ships comes out of nowhere, and immediately all our computers stop working, and most of the crew go gaga. Fortunately, after the initial attack, whatever it was that was affecting people diminished in power. I managed to stay conscious and get the ship under manual. I saw this place coming out of the nothingness and tried for a landing. This is Terminal." Villa agreed that it was. "Once I recognized the shape of the place, I tried to land close to where the hatches were. I reckoned that control system was interfering with the computer could start up again at any time and get me too, but with a bit of luck might not work under the ground. I also presumed the links would all be frozen to death this far out from the sun. I didn't reckon on those monsters you've been breeding out there." "We don't breed them, they mutate," Villa told him. He took a look at the scratches that Tarrant had received and plugged in the automatic medical scanner built into the couch. As it worked, scanning and treating the wounds, Tarrant continued with his story. Injured and alone, drifting through the outer reaches of the galaxy, Tarrant had finally brought his freighter to a fringe planet which existed mostly to enhance trade between the Federation and the small number of worlds that survived outside its sphere of influence. There he gained employment as a pilot on a small freighter running between Federation and non-Federation planets. His nose for illegal involvements and adventure quickly led to his becoming involved in a series of off-the-record runs exporting cargoes which the Federation would rather never have had imported, and importing some that they would rather never have seen. As his talent as a pilot became recognized, Tarrant moved up through the ranks until he pushed his luck too far trying to offload Herculaneum from outside the Federation onto Earth itself. However, before his trial could take place, word passed around that Servalan was about to attack, that many of the armaments supplied in recent months were now worthless and unstable, that many Federation troops could not be relied upon to fight for Earth, and that all in all the situation was desperate. Faced with the option of being tried for what was now defined as a treasonable offence, or working as a pilot for the administration at a suitable rank and suitable pay, Tarrant had chosen the obvious route. He was now recognised as one of the best administration pilots. Having completed his story, Tarrant relaxed in the recovery couch and listened to Villa's tale in silence. At the end, he stretched himself carefully and, feeling no more pain, stood up. As Villa led the way to the central control chamber, Tarrant summed up the situation. Neither of us know what happened on Gouda Prime after Avon shot Blake. And if Avon is telling the truth, he doesn't know either because he was in prison. Added to that, you still haven't discovered why Avon shot Blake in the first place. You haven't learned much in your time with Avon. Villa was defensive. I didn't want to push him too hard. You saw how he was. He could have pointed a gun at me and fired it. I was biding my time. But he certainly knew what he was doing coming here, and he obviously knew what was going on when he refused to work for the Gamorreans. And now, on top of everything else, he wants to pull off his famous million-credit fraud. Suddenly, Villa realised the implication of telling Tarrant everything. You wouldn't split on him, would you? I mean, you wouldn't report what he's up to the administration. We were together a long time, Tarrant, you and I. You can keep quiet, can't you? I've saved you out there. Yes, you did, Villa, and I'm grateful, replied Tarrant. But I wouldn't shop you anyway. The administration is simply my employer, and when this little emergency is over, they may not even want to be that. But who is going to win? Asked Villa. The Gamorreans have got everyone guessing. No one can fly except us. So why don't we fly? Asked Tarrant. Because I'm waiting for Avon. Without him, we've no credit. Besides, he's the only one who really understands the computer system here. And I'm not even sure he could get it going with everything being bypassed into CAT. But I am a pilot. You forget that, Villa. No, Tarrant. I just don't see where we could go. The money is the most important part of the plan. Without the credit, we'll just be on the run again. I'll sit here and wait for Avon. You can stay too if you like. Tarrant looked at Villa and then around the control room as if making up his mind. Well, I can't fly my ship and I don't want to spend much time outside, so I might as well keep you company, Villa, he said finally. At least for the time being. Avon handed the complate over without a word. Will it work? Asked Carell innocently. Oh yes, it'll work. The problem is what'll come back in return. Carell looked at Avon curiously. For once the smile passed from her face, but she held back from any further questioning, preferring to get on with the task of installing the new device. As she turned to the door, Avon called her back. You'll also need this, he said, holding out a plastic card. She took it without recognition. What is it? The program for the complate. Carell's frown turned to irritation. Avon allowed a brief smile across his face in suitable ironic contrast. He had, he hoped, annoyed her sufficiently for her to forget, at least for the moment, what he might do when left alone in the defense control room. Carell's job was now to duplicate the plate along with its program so that it would work on not only this, but also the 5 identical computer defense rooms situated in the other major domes on Earth. In theory, all 6 defense computers should act in the same way. But in practice, there were always small differences in the speed of operation and the route taken through the complex programming. The operators would ignore such small deviations. A few small additions of Avon's own should go unnoticed. Avon finished his final amendment as Carell walked back into the room. He turned to face her. What will it do? She demanded. rework the calculations without Tariel cell interfacing. It'll take longer, but it still works. Have you known about that possibility long? Since I first found Aurak. Ensor never made his basic research findings available, just the finished result. So I took the finished work and progressed backwards, and finally found an alternative system possible using Dorian data. But is it just as effective? For once, Carell looked unsure. Dorian data has very little practical use since Tariel cell is quicker, cheaper, and more accurate. And now that I have completed my half of the bargain, it is your turn to complete yours. Your freedom to return to terminal? As she spoke, Carell looked away from Avon and up to the monitor camera tucked away in the roof of the room. You shall have it, Avon. But before we allow revenge out of Earth space, we need to be satisfied that your complate works and that your ship can pass through solar space safely. In fact, and here her old radiance and smile returned, both will happen at once. If the Dorian data works, then the battle with the Gamorreans will be over. The Federation and Servalan forces will be unready for resumption of fighting, and we shall mop up resistance very quickly. The duplications of the plate and programs will be completed by now. Shall we stay here and watch them work? Avon sat passively and watched as the plates were inserted and the program run. At once, the telltale sound that had dominated the machines since the Gamorreans' attack disappeared. As they watched, the administration ships responded to orders and reopened fire, attacking in sequence the ships of Gamma and Servalan, although the rebel Federation forces of Yardin were left alone. Lights on the screen flared, blinked, and went out as ships were destroyed. As the moments passed, the ships of Servalan's fleet and those of the Federation reorganized themselves and recovered from the effect of the Gamorrean interference, resuming the attack, although so out of position and so seriously depleted, they made little of their opportunity. Only the Gamorrean fleet failed to respond as projected. Instead of cutting and running, having found their prime weapon overcome, they started moving at growing speeds towards Earth. Carell turned to Avon. "You're doing?" she asked. There was no malice in her voice, no anger. It was as if she had expected a trick. "Something like that," Avon told her. "And it can be undone. Just as Tariel cell technology can be inverted to produce beams which inhibit everything from weaponry systems to the simplest programming, so can Dorian data. And the inversion can be used to draw people towards you. The defenses are drawing them in." Avon paused as he saw Carell move to switch the defense shield off. "Do that, and you open the way to Tariel interference once more. I will remove the inversion once I am safely on board Revenge and on my way back to Terminal. You, Carell, will come with me to ensure my good conduct." Showing no surprise, Carell agreed. Senior officials were informed and passes issued. Under armed guard, Carell and Avon were escorted back to the ship. "Defense Killer 7 to pilot." Tarrant picked up his communicator in surprise. It was about 5 inches long and less than half an inch wide. Holding it registered his presence and allowed his communication back to the ship. In the hands of anyone else, it would have refused to work. "Pilot to Defense Killer 7, Merritt, have you got control back?" "Yes, sir, and the battle has been resumed. We're wiping Servalan off the face of the galaxy. The rebel Federation forces are fleeing, but the Gamorreans are advancing on Earth. We are ordered in, sir. Can you return to the ship?" Yes. No." Tarrant removed his hand from the contact and spoke to Villa. "Are those creatures out there all the time?" "They've probably mutated into something else by now," Villa told him solemnly. "You'll be safer here. I should stay if I were you." "Not a chance," Tarrant told him. "This whole affair smells of being one of Avon's tricks. Avon goes to Gamma, and the Gamorreans attack with a disabling weapon. Avon goes to Earth, and the weapon is turned off so that we mop up the opposition. The Gamorreans then move in on Earth." "You mean Avon did a deal with the Gamorreans after all?" "Wake up, Villa," said Tarrant tersely. "He never told you what was going on in the past, and he hasn't started yet. He uses you just like he used all of us on Liberator and Scorpio. So what's he doing on Earth? For all I know, he's probably convinced the administration that their best interests are served in doing a deal with him. He plays the cards all ways, Villa, and all ways lead to the best deal for Avon. Tarrant put his hand back on his communicator. This is the pilot. I'm in an underground city about half a mile from the ship. I'm going to start working my way to the surface now. There are creatures on the surface from which I'll need protection. I'll contact you again when I reach the exit port. Get lights and weaponry aimed at the area 120 degrees from the ship. Tarrant's signal was formally acknowledged. He turned to Villa. You could come too? What? Out there? With those creatures? You must be joking, Tarrant. And what do I get at the end of it? Another prison sentence on Earth? Anyway, why come and be bullied by you rather than Avon? Makes no difference, Tarrant. You or Avon, it doesn't matter. He looked desperately sad. I'll stay here. It's your choice, said Tarrant. He pulled on his coat, walked to the door, and then paused. And thanks for saving my life. Villa looked away. His face was a strange mixture of emotions. Think nothing of it, he said, as he touched the controls to bring into focus the exit that Tarrant would soon be using on the surface. Villa stayed at his position, staring at the screen as the newly evolved snow-covered mammoths appeared lumbering towards Tarrant. They were over 20 feet tall and 50 feet long, including the large bone structures that started above the eyes, pointed forward, and ended in massive horns which they used as snowplows. They were too slow to worry Tarrant directly, although they did cause him to divert from a direct path to his ship. Villa continued to watch as a pack of pure white tigers, almost invisible against the snow, attacked, and Tarrant fell for the first and then second time. But by then his eyes had long since stopped relaying to his brain what was on the screen.